The difference in base power was simply too vast. Compared to Ultima and Carrera, his existence value was more than 20 times theirs. Even compared to Luminous, who possessed a Genesis-class weapon, he held more than double her power. Jahil, heedless of the consequences, had ignited that power internally and launched a suicide attack. Stopping him by ordinary means was impossible. Hey Carrera, didn't you say you were going to smash it head-on? Don't be ridiculous. That thing. I thought it looked a little too impossible to handle, okay? Well, it is impossible. That move appears reckless at a glance, but it is surprisingly illogical. Luminous offered this assessment, ignoring Ultima and Carrera as they began to bicker. Jahil's attack was simple. It lacked technique. It was nothing more than a brute force combination of his authority and raw power. And yet, even without Jahil intending it, it was functioning as a specific art. The internal combustion caused by the hellfire of the ultimate enchantment and I burned within him, consuming Jahil's magicules. This reacted with the power reactor within Thune's body, causing his energy levels to skyrocket abnormally. Furthermore, the scales covering Thune's body had transformed into armor made of the ultimate metal, Hurricane, protecting Jahil. The combination of these factors turned Jahil himself into a massive fireball. Merely touching him would inflict massive damage, making any careless attempt to engage him fatally dangerous. Jahil bounded around as if leaping. His body, which had lost all traces of Thune and bore a striking resemblance to Footman, bounced just like a bull. And wherever that massive fireball made contact, even the earth collapsed into dust and burned away to nothing. Jai. Savor my terror to your heart's content. Jahil laughed uproariously as he closed in on Ultima and the others. Yuki, who had been spectating from the sidelines as if this were someone else's business, also realized that the situation was dire. This was because there was no telling when or where Jahil's attacks would be directed. Behind Yuki were Kagari and the others who had been left behind by the suspended world. If Jahil were to charge here, it would be difficult to defend against him. This is bad. I could easily escape on my own, but protecting everyone is difficult. Actually, it's impossible, isn't it? Yuki thought hard, but no good ideas came to mind. No matter how he looked at it, he could only pray that Jahil wouldn't come this way. But you know, whenever I think stuff like that, bad imaginings have a tendency to come true. That jinx was about to hit the mark once again. As Yuki watched on, Carrera dodged Jahil effortlessly, like a matador handling a bull. Hey, he dodged again. Isn't that obvious? Unless you're a massive idiot, you wouldn't just stand there and take something like that. Ultima mocked Carrera, only to be brushed off nonchalantly. While that conversation unfolded, Yuki had no time for such things. Crap. No matter how he looked at it, the Jahil that Carrera had dodged was on a direct collision course with Yuki. Yuki himself could dodge with ease, but if he did, his comrades would die. You kidding, right? Does this mean I have to become that massive idiot? Thinking it couldn't be helped, Yuki steeled his resolve. He had wanted to aim higher, but it seemed he had no choice but to give up here. However, he had no intention of dying for free. Jahil's attack couldn't be nullified by anti-skill alone, but he planned to minimize the damage by skillfully combining it with steel life. If it went well, he could survive. Believing that, Yuki made his gamble. Oh, screw it. Leaving luck to heaven. That's a line I absolutely never wanted to say. Thinking such thoughts, Yuki braced himself. The absolute difference in magic power between him and Jahil was not something that could be negated by clumsy technique. With the advantage of his authority gone, the awaiting conclusion was bound to be tragic. Still, if he was lucky. This is the worst. The great me, relying on luck at the very end. Yuki mocked himself, yet tried to do his best with a positive outlook when his eyes were stolen by a wall that appeared right before him. Heh, you're acting awfully timid, not very boss-like at all. Hearing that hateful tone, he realized that the wall was actually a back. Is that Vega? You bet. Immediately after, an illusion occurred as if a massive vibration had been generated. It was the result of Jahil and Vega colliding, but if time had been flowing, the entire surrounding area would likely have been reduced to ashes. Vega. Yuki called out. Vega was alive, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Even comparing existence values, he was superior to Jahil. He wasn't going to die that easily. Furthermore, although not unscathed, Vega's turn was not over yet. To counter Jahil's maximum fireball, Vega had activated Infinite Eater. Having incorporated Solanus' Devastator virus, Infinite Eater exerted a terrifying effect. It corroded the target and transformed it into his own flesh. It was a fiendishly brutal technique, far surpassing Yuki's steel life. Jahil was like a projectile of super high heat and power, but Vega was a monster capable of consuming even that. The damage from the direct hit of Jahil's maximum fireball was severe, but it was being repaired by infinite regeneration, and the lost energy was being replenished by devouring Jahil. Far from a crisis, it looked like Vega's victory, no matter how you sliced it. Crush, crunch, slope vibrating ominously, Vega began to swallow Jahal. Jahal had turned himself into a fireball, but now that he was captured by Vega, it seemed he had no means of escape. Let go. Will you not unhand me, you lowlife? Jahal desperately increased his heat output, thinking to burn Vega to nothing. However, Vega paid no mind to the burns, and continued to devour Jahal rapidly. It was a gruesome scene. A normal person would avert their eyes, but Yuki was not one to care about such things. Ha, impressive as always. I wasted my time worrying, Yuki said, throwing a snide remark at Vega. In response, Vega laughed fearlessly. Yeah. If it wasn't for the great me, you'd be dead. He, too, completely ignored Jahal's cries of resentment, acting boisterously and seemingly happy. Vega was satisfied. Why had he protected Yuki? It was an action Vega himself couldn't quite understand. The usual Vega would have abandoned him. However, having endured a mind-numbing amount of time in solitude, a slight change had occurred within Vega. Strangely satisfied, Vega thought. Haha, looks like even I can do it if I try. He had lived his life thinking only of himself, believing others were nothing but stepping stones. He had deceived even his own heart, telling himself he didn't need comrades. But now, leaving aside even the calculation of profit and loss, he had naturally moved for the sake of a comrade. No, in that moment, he didn't even have the leeway to care what Yuki and the others thought of him. He simply didn't want everyone to die. That was Vega's true feeling, and the reason his body had moved on its own. However, in contrast to the satisfied Vega, Jahal was on the verge of being completely devoured. Don't screw with me. Don't screw with me. His feelings of resentment deepened endlessly. And then, he arrived at a single conclusion. As a result, a thought communication reached Yuki and Vega, who were laughing together, from the sky above. Hey, this isn't the time to let your guard down. It was Carrera. Leaving Ultima, who looked at her as if asking what she was talking about, she issued a warning to Yuki's group. By all appearances, the battle was settled. Despite thinking what is she talking about, Ultima sensed the faint presence of something like magic activating. The only thing that could activate while time was stopped was primitive magic, which even they couldn't handle. There was no way someone like Jahal could use it, yet the presence was too distinct to ignore. That said, it was at a level only noticeable to Carrera and Ultima, who were adept at magic. The activation maintained an exquisite line. The reason being, it was a hex utilizing death, the concentration of Jahal's grudge as a medium, a sorcery distinct from magic. It exerted effects like magic, yet it was not magic. Unlike mystery, reincarnation or grand art, possession incarnation, which were systematized techniques that anyone could potentially use, this was different. It was a unique evil art that only Jahal could handle, the taboo art. Body snatch. In this case, the two primordials deserve praise. Because it exerted an effect like magic, Carrera and Ultima were able to sense the presence. Noticing such a thing in the suspended world, where all waves and wavelengths were halted, would have been impossible for Yuki, genius though he may be. Much less Vega, who didn't even suspect what was happening. He didn't realize he was under attack, nor did he understand what Carrera was guarding against. What is it? What the hell is happening? Jahal is still alive. Vega, kill him immediately. Huh? Oh? Ordered by Yuki, Vega began to panic. However, by that time, it was already too late. Originally, body snatch was a technique premised on one's own death. Even if they wanted to kill him, Jahal's death was already confirmed. Maria, having completed her analysis, screamed in panic. It's impossible, it's no use. His target is Vega's own body. Jahal intended to destroy Vega's heart core and hijack his consciousness along with it. Vega tried to resist, but he had no means to do so. The ultimate skill evil Dragon King Azidahaka was an invincible authority, but it actually had few countermeasures against mental attacks. This was because it deflected everything before it could reach the inside, so there had never been a need to be that cautious. To begin with, mental attacks generally do not work on ultimate skill holders. That is the norm. Affecting the inner mind should be impossible. To make it possible, one had to satisfy truly numerous conditions and follow careful procedures. Jahal's action was a desperate Hail Mary attempt born of despair. However, fate smiled upon Jahal. First, the condition of reaching the physical interior. This was achieved by being eaten. Next, Vega's spirituality. While his physical aspect was tough, Vega's mind was immature and remained very childlike. On top of that, he was completely exhausted from the world at the end. Since he had revived the moment his heart core was about to vanish, his interior was in tatters. His mental defenses were in a state of collapse. It was the perfect timing for Jahal to strike. As a result, Jahal won the bet. Vega wore an expression of shock and turned his gaze toward Yuki, seeking salvation. "Bo boss, help me. Saw something's wrong." Inside me there's something rebels, Gah. Vega began to writhe in agony, and his body started to pulsate violently. It was a phenomenon similar to when he ate Jahil, but it was clear that this time, it was not by Vega's will. Tisk, this is bad. That's an absurd amount of energy. Agreed. I'd like to dispose of it now, but this might be a little beyond our hands. Carrera and Ultima were anxious. Even Luminous seemed at a loss for words. That was to be expected, for a new monster was about to be born. A monster integrating the existence values of Vega, Jahal, Carrera, and Sylvia. Swim, capable of manipulating all their authorities. Jahil. Magnificent, what magnificent power. Laughing wickedly was the victor, Jahal. Save me, boss, sobbed me. Growing out of the palm of Jahal's right hand was Vega's head. He had left it there intentionally. You trash. I'll teach you the price of underestimating me. This piece of shit is an example. Jahal squeezed Vega's head. Guja. Stop. Stop. Vega cried out in anguish. Terrifying pressure was applied, nearly cracking his skull. Or rather, it seemed Jahal was repeating a cycle of crushing it the moment it cracked, then loosening his grip to let it regenerate. Perhaps because all of Vega's authorities had been stolen, even his sense of pain seemed to be reproduced. Vega screamed from the tremendous torture, but there was nothing to be done about it. In contrast to Vega, Jahal was transforming into an increasingly sleek physique. He was not based on footman, nor was the young girl form of Sylvia the model. He had derived the optimal solution for his body, taking the form of his younger days as the first high disciple of the divine ancestor Twilight Valentine, the original Jahal. And that body was covered in an exoskeleton of the ultimate metal, Hurricane, shining in rainbow colors over a black base. Because Vega had eaten even Zelanis, that terrifying physical information had been reproduced. Magnificent. I feel power surging through me like never before. Jahal spoke with satisfaction. In his hand, Vega gasped in agony. That contrast told the reality of the victor and the loser. Seeing this, Yuki steeled his resolve.